It's day 2 of my top album countdowns. What's in store for this one? Find out. I'm Luke, this is Stage 76. So this is actually the very first video I ever wrote for Stage 76, or well, what would become Stage 76. I had a different name for it back then. I was workshopping it for a really long time and ended up never actually coming out with anything. But either way, I still wrote this video back at the end of 2020, counting down my top 5 albums. I was fully prepared to make a video on it. Never did, but hey, better late than never. So this was actually written, all the writing except for like what I'm doing right here was written years ago. So let's get into it. Number 5, Lamb of God, Lamb of God. This was exactly what I had been hoping for from Lamb of God since their studio release in 2015. It's simple groove metal goodness. It goes hard all the way through. Seeing what Art Cruz could do on a Lamb of God record was really awesome. This was the first lineup change the band had had in 20 years. This really worked out for them though. No one is ever a true replacement for a former band member, but the change here worked. Art's drumming is top notch. Willie and Mark continue to put out excellent riffs. Randy sounds as good as he ever has. And John ties it all together with that sweet bass undertone. Memento Mori, New Colossal Hate, and Resurrection Man are the standout tracks on the album. I'm really happy that I managed to actually see some of these played live. I have something in the script about not being able to see them played live because I wrote it in 2020 in the middle of a pandemic. But fortunately, we're in 2022 now, so things are a little bit different. Let's get to the next one. Number 4, Ghostmane, Anti-Icon. If you would have told me at the beginning of that year that Ghostmane would have been on my top albums of 2020, I wouldn't have believed you. Not because I don't like his music, but it's generally not been the type of thing that I get super into. This album truly subverted my expectations. The moment I heard Lazaretto, I knew this was going to be something great. I don't even know what to call it. So I'll say what everyone was calling it back then, post-genre. It really does not obey the conventions of your typical genre lines. Anti-Icon, if you really boil it down, it's rap and rock, but that's a gross oversimplification of what this album is. It hits so many different notes in just the perfect way and scratches all these different musical itches I didn't even know that I had. Granted, I don't have a super refined music taste or anything, but this just really hits some odd sweet spot. Hearing a more strictly rap track like Hell Rap placed directly after an industrial rock track like Hydrochloride seems like an odd pairing, but this just works. My words won't really do this or any album I talk about here the justice they deserve, so go listen to every album I mention here, please. You're a catastrophe. Number 3, Trivium, What the Dead Men Say. I'm heading back into more traditional metal territory with this album, but for good reason. Back in late 2019, I thought it odd that 2 calendar years had passed and there was no new Trivium album. Soon after that, Catastrophist dropped, and then me and my buddy Peter, who's a way bigger Trivium fan than I will ever hope to be, we were just losing it. Absolutely losing it. A couple months pass and What the Dead Men Say is released. A lot of the tracks on this album really hit different points that Trivium hadn't really hit up until now. Bleed Into Me and Scattering the Ashes really hit a somewhat lighter side for the band. Don't get me wrong, these are still very much metal songs, but they just hit in a bit of a lighter but somehow still heavy way. And I cannot talk about this album without mentioning Bending the Arc to Fear. This is one of the absolute best tracks Trivium has ever put out. Easily my favorite on the album. What kills me is that they consider this one a deep cut, seeing as they played it in one of their deep cuts and B-side streams. Hopefully that doesn't mean there's no chance I'll ever see them play it live, but only time will tell. Number 2, Poppy, I Disagree. What do you believe when nobody is watching? What do you believe? Since nobody is watching this video, I believe that my number 2 album of 2020 is Poppy's I Disagree. This album is the epitome of what is this? But in the best way possible. I went into hearing this album with zero expectations whatsoever, other than the couple of tracks I had heard from it before on Google Play Radio, back when I was still using that. This album just kills it. It is just all over the place in the best way possible. Similar to Ghostmane's album, this is another post-genre work, but it's completely different from Ghostmane's album. Sometimes there are even genre shifts within the songs themselves. Concrete starts out as this whispery pop song, and then you've got these distorted guitar riffs coming in, and the drums hit, and that just blows me away. And that's just the first song on the album. Sometimes it's pop songs with metal elements. Sometimes it's metal songs with pop elements. A lot of the time, artists try to combine lots of musical styles, and it doesn't turn out very well for them. This is not one of those times. I have not been able to stop listening to this album since it came out. I wrote that in 2020, and it still rings true today in 2022. I don't get that way about many albums, and this one is truly something worth listening to and will stand the test of time. Number 1, Code Orange, Underneath. The hype I had coming at this album was intense. I always try my best to temper my expectations with any piece of media being released so I don't end up over-anticipating and being disappointed. But I couldn't control myself in this situation. The title track drops and it's something cool, new, and nothing like anything they'd ever released before. Then Swallowing the Rabbit Hole comes out and it's awesome and nothing like the title track. I didn't know exactly what to expect from this album other than it being amazing. I even bought tickets to the album release show, which unfortunately was canceled the day before the show due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and concerts didn't exist for a while after that. They really picked up the pieces by instead doing a Twitch stream to an empty crowd, and they absolutely killed it. Back on topic, I set my expectations for this album extremely, extremely high, and it managed to exceed every single one of them. This album simply does not let up the whole way through. There's not a single bad track on this album. It's got all the heavy and super distorted guitars and the weird electronic sounds. They just blend together in the most perfect way. Nobody does it the same as Code Orange. I've never heard anything quite like Underneath, and it is absolutely my number 1 album of 2020. And that is my top 5 albums of 2020. Thank you for sticking around, checking out the second one of these. If you haven't watched the first one, go watch it. If you're watching the day this comes out, which you probably aren't, watch the next one tomorrow. If the next one's already out, watch it now. I'm Luke. This is Stage 76.